Hello and welcome to Jrock's Pop Culture Revolution. This is episode number one, part two, and I'm your host, Jason Jrock Houston. Now, last time when we got together, we were talking about some of my favorite catchphrases from some of my favorite classic TV shows. And I could not believe when I got done doing that episode that there were so many other catchphrases that I forgot to even mention. And and so I thought, okay, we got to do part two. And the main reason for doing this part two, um, I got to tell you guys, is because since we did the first episode, um, great legendary actress from one of my favorite classic TV shows passed away. Of course, talking about Polly Holiday, the actress that played the fiery Texas bombshell known as Flo from Alice, the classic 1970s TV show. And of course, you know, Flo's um, catchphrase that really kind of made her the breakout star on that show was "Kiss my grits." Now, very much like we talked about in part one of this episode, the famous catchphrase from Happy Days, another great classic TV show from that era, was "Sit on it," and that was one of those things that everybody in the Happy Days cast got to say. Now, again, very much like "sit on it," which was a nice way of saying, you know, hey, f you, without actually saying the word. You know, Flo's "Kiss My Grit" is very much like a Southern way of kind of, you know, saying "kiss my, you know what, kiss me on the sunny side up." But anyways, that was just one of those great catchphrases, and very much like Jimmy Walker's "Dynamite" that we also talked a great deal about in part one of this episode. Flo's "Kiss My Grits" that became, you know, a real major staple of pop culture. Anybody would reference the show Alice, you'd think of Flo and you'd think her catchy, beautiful catchphrase, "Kiss my grits," and she said it with all her Texas charm. Now, also in reference to the show Alice, um, Vic Tayback, who played Mel, the owner and the cook of the diner, he had a couple of his own little catchphrases. They weren't quite as lovable as Flo's "Kiss My Grits," but of course, um, in reference to Mel, he was famous for saying "Stew it," and he'd typically say anytime he got mad at anybody or going off, you know, verbally at somebody, giving them a verbal lashing. Typically, any of the waitresses that worked for him would get this a lot. And then one of the waitresses, played by Beth Howland, of course, you know, Dingy Vera. I mean, she was kind of, I guess, the closest thing Mel ever had to like having a daughter or you know or anything like that. But he would get very frustrated with her a lot of times, and she'd do a lot of crazy, goofy things. And so his little lovable nickname for her was "Dingy, Dingy, Dingy." Okay, and again, like I said, Polly Holiday, who played Flo on Alice, um, she died the other night. Now, a cause of death hasn't been given, you know, just yet. But she was 88 years old, so she had a long and healthy life, you know. And years after appearing on Alice, you know, I believe it was in the 90s when she appeared on a couple episodes of the show Home Improvement as Tim Allen's mother-in-law. Now, again, in reference to Flo and her "Kiss My Grits," okay, very much like we talked about in part one of this episode with Jimmy Walker and his Dynamite. Um, once Flo started doing her "Kiss My Grits," she really became the breakout star. And in doing research for tonight's episode, what I learned is Alice was originally created and based around actress Linda Lavin. She had the leading role of Alice, and she was she played on Broadway and acted before Alice, and she was known as a singer. And so, of course, if you know anything about the backstory of Alice, Linda Lavin was this widowed mother of a teenage son. She'd been married to a truck driver who was killed in an awful truck accident. That's kind of the backstory of Alice. And so Her and her son, I believe they moved from where they originally lived in New York or New Jersey to Phoenix, Arizona, and they take a drive out to Phoenix, Arizona. The car breaks down. Along the way, she finds out that they have a help wanted sign at Mel's Diner, and she ends up staying for 8 years and raising her son. But anyways, so again, Alice was supposed to be centered around actress Linda Lavin, and when Flo started taking off with her "Kiss My Grits," she really became the centerpiece of the show. A lot of attention started going to her. And apparently, behind the scenes, there's a lot of friction between Polly Holiday and Linda Lavin. Linda Lavin did not like the fact that all of a sudden that she's got the title role in Alice, and Polly Holiday has got this great catchphrase that everybody's loving, and she's all of a sudden in getting just as many scenes as Linda Lavin is in, and Linda Lavin's not really having it. She starts complaining to the producers. At first, they don't want to do nothing, but eventually they decide, okay, you know what? Maybe we can have our cake and eat it too. So they kind of realized that Linda Lavin was supposed to be in the leading role. The show was supposed to be centered around her. So they decided to give Flo her own spin-off series. How many times had that been done before? And at first, the Flo show, lasted for 2 seasons, but then they started, changing the time slot, and so people didn't know when it was on, and it just after 2 seasons kind of just vanished, and we never heard a word about Flo again. Flo was never really even mentioned ever again, except for maybe I think in the final episode, I remember them having flashback scenes, and she was referenced that way. But so Flo and Kiss My Grits, as great as it was, it kind of led to the demise of the Flo character. So she left after 4 seasons on Alice. So that's what happened there. Now, some other fun, catchphrases from the 1960s. Okay, if you go back to Lost in Space, one of the most famous ones was, of course, the robot would say, "Danger, Will Robinson! Danger, Will Robinson!" And again, you watch Lost in Space, which was a little before my time, but of course I've seen it in reruns. And man, the sets on Lost in Space they were kind of hokey for the time, but I mean that was high tech back then. Those sets, and I just love watching that stuff. And Will Robinson, Danger, Will Robinson, that got in my head many times watching those classic reruns. Of course, in the late 1960s, we've also had the classic Batman TV show starring Adam West as Batman and Burt Ward as his loyal sidekick and ward, Robin, a.k.a. Dick Grayson. And Batman would often, you remember at the beginning of every episode where they go down the bat pole to the bat cave, Robin, to the Batmobile! So, again, just to the Batmobile doesn't sound like much of a catchphrase, but as a kid, it was one of the things I looked forward to every time I'd see a rerun of a classic Batman show from the 1960s. The 1960s also gave way to Get Smart, starring, of course, Don Adams as Maxwell Smart. And how many times did you just love it when Don Adams would say, "Chief, I missed it by this much"? So again, these are catchphrases that get into our head. And I think another one that dates back to the 1960s is, Peanuts, which was based on cartoonist and animator and creator, Peanuts creator Charles Schulz's life story. Basically, Charlie Brown is the world's most depressed kid, as we know, and basically Peanuts is centered around the life of Charles Schulz, which is very interesting. And you may remember Charlie Brown's famous catchphrase was, "Oh, good grief." A lot of times, the other kids would say to him, "Oh," I think Lucy even said a couple of times, "Oh, good grief, Charlie Brown. Good grief. What are you always so depressed about?" but again, for being the world's most depressed kid, I love watching those classic um, peanut cartoons, those classic holiday episodes like the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown. And down the line, we're going to be, since Halloween's right around the corner, we're going to be doing an episode on that particular holiday special. So be on the lookout for that. Let me see. Okay. Oh, also another one we briefly touched on last time, it dates back, I think, 1950s, 1960s, is Yabba Dabba Doo. And of course, I'm talking about Red Flintstone. And so that is the oh, okay. And then I think, yeah, another one that goes back, I think, a little bit farther to the 1950s. I Love Lucy, and of course, Desi Arnaz, who was married to Lucille Ball, great comedic comedy team at the time, real life couple, Hollywood couple. He was famous for saying, "Lucy, you got some splaining to do." Okay, and now we get into the 1970s, which is that's my era where I was from. I came into the world, folks, July 4th, 1971, just so you have a reference point there. Okay, so some of the stuff like Lost in Space, a little before my time, but like a lot of people, I caught that in reruns. Now, getting to the 1970s, a great classic catchphrase, and I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about when I say "up your nose with a rubber hose." Of course, that is in reference to John Travolta as Vinnie Barbarino on Welcome Back, Kotter. That was again another way of saying, "Hey, up yours," in the not too polite of a way, but that became with the craze of John Travolta in the 1970s. He rose to fame, of course, in the 1970s on Welcome Back, Kotter, and eventually Travolta fever got so big that it caused him to eventually leave Welcome Back, Kotter, but the very TV show that had broke him out and made him a major star back then. And of course, after leaving Welcome Back, Kotter, he would, of course, go on to do both the movie Grease with Olivia Newton-John. And let's not forget, he also was in the big disco movie of the 1970s. Of course, I'm talking about Saturday Night Fever. And John Travolta, it was Travolta Fever once Saturday Night Fever came out. And of course, the Bee Gees were king on the soundtrack there. But Travolta, he especially once we got to Grease, Travolta Fever was just major going on, and he sang on some of the Grease soundtrack. So in addition to being a great actor, people found out Travolta could also sing. And of course, once John Travolta left Welcome Back, Kotter, it's one of those cases where the show did go on for a couple more seasons, but it was just not the same. I mean, they were missing the king sweat hog, if you will, and there's just no replacing John Travolta or Vinnie Barbarino. I mean, they could have brought in another actor playing Vinnie Barbarino 2.2 or whatever, but it just would not have been the same. Of course, another great show from the 1970s that had a couple great catchphrases was All in the Family. Now, of course, you had Archie Bunker, the lead character, lovable kind of guy that loves his family, and he's kind of a loudmouth and rude and crude, but he speaks his mind. Deep down, everybody knows Archie's a good guy, but anyways, he gets crude and he's rude sometimes, and he is a loudmouth. And one of the things he became known for, which was very controversial at the time, is he called his idiot son-in-law that he didn't like, and he never got over the fact this guy, stole his little girl, but and he didn't like the fact that his son-in-law was he was a bleeding heart liberal, and Archie's a Republican, and so they're butting heads politically, and they don't see eye to eye, and his son-in-law is he's got a bleeding heart for he wants to help every man, where Archie, he loves his family, but a lot of times Archie's not so much thinking about the other people in the world, if you know what I mean. And so Archie, again, quite controversial at the time, 1970s, but one of his catchphrases was calling his son-in-law a meathead. And this was in reference to his son-in-law being Polish. And that's something that unfortunately is kind of a racial slur at the time that a lot of people would make in reference to Polish people. Now, Norman Lear, the creator of the show, he said, he said in some interviews in the past that Archie Bunker was very much based on his own father, and his father kind of talked like that. And so that's where he kind of got that from. Also, in reference to Archie Bunker, he loved his wife Edith, madly, but she drove him crazy, and so from time to time he would call her a dingbat. Again, this is the 1970s, and very controversial kind of phrasing to be put on TV back then. But again, it shows you how much the world has changed from the 1970s to 2025. I do not believe that a show like All in the Family would exist today. And if it did, you'd probably not get away with that kind of, language. But that's how the world has kind of, changed. And so, okay, again, let's see. Oh, another Archie Bunker kind of catchphrase was also, you could say this to almost anybody, but a lot of times, and throughout the history of a show, he would say this in reference to his wife. Will you stifle it, Edith? And then, okay, this is another one dates back to the 1970s. Interestingly enough, this is in reference to two different shows. Now, it originated on, okay, this is the catchphrase I'm talking about. Hey, hey, hey. Now, depending on when you came up in the world, again, this dates back to the 1970s. Hey, hey, hey. A lot of people will say that's a reference to Fat Albert. For sure, definitely, no doubt about it. That's where that catchphrase originated. Now, like me, if you were watching TV in the 1970s, you might also think, hey, 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 that's a reference to Dwayne on What's Happening. That was Dwayne's catchphrase whenever he'd be talking to anybody or he'd be getting really excited. Hey, Raj, hey, Rerun. Hey, 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 what's going on, gang? So again, interesting in reference to hey, 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 originated on Fat Albert, and then I don't know if anybody even thought about that, but in reference to Dwayne on What's Happening, that became Dwayne's main catchphrase. Hey, 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 hey. So that's kind of interesting. Now, another great one, maybe not as great as some of these other ones I mentioned, but definitely worth mentioning is, well, excuse me. And of course, that is in reference to Steve Martin on Saturday Night Live. Great classic comedy skit show. That is Saturday Night Live. If you remember, that's the place where a lot of great comedians that would find success in Hollywood got their start. Of course, not only am I talking about Steve Martin, but I'm talking about guys like Chevy Chase, Eddie Murphy, Adam Sandler, Mike Myers, Dana Carvey, just to name a few, okay? But man, and then Bugs Bunny, okay, that's probably one of the, like I said in episode 1, part 1, probably the oldest catchphrase that goes back to the 1940s would be, hey kids, what time? It's howdy doody time. That would date back to the 1940s. Now, another one was probably dates back to around the same time. Two classic ones that we know from Looney Tunes. And of course, probably the oldest one of all here, it would be, what's up, Doc? A great reference, of course, to Bugs Bunny, folks. Another Looney Tunes catchphrase I always loved is, that's all, folks. Of course, that's the Porky Pig reference. And again, some of these catchphrases are better than others, but the fact that "What's up, Doc?" and um, "Hey, that's all." That's all, folks. In reference to Porky Pig, the fact that those also date back to the 1940s, it tells you that a lot of the great successful things that were part of our life, pop culture wise, had to do with having a great catchphrase. And some are so great, like I said, "Hey, hey, hey." That was used on two different shows, and some people will hear that they think Fat Albert. Some will think "What's Happening." I think of both because I was around back then. So again, we had to do a part two of episode one because since we did the last episode, actress Polly Holiday died, and I wanted to kind of pay tribute to her. And how could you have a show talking about some of these classic catchphrases and not even mention "Kiss my grits"? So, man, we are just getting started with Jrock's pop culture revolution. We've already completed a two-part episode for episode one. Now, tune in, you know, tune in sometime next week for episode two. And what we'll be talking about then is some of my favorite classic TV characters of all time. We're just getting the pop culture conversation started, folks. I've really enjoyed doing this. I've been your host, Jason Jrock Houston. Take care. Have a great weekend. We'll see you. We'll see you again. See you again real soon. Take care. Bye for now.